Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 69 of the Whitey and Will Sports Show. Today is Sunday, March 5th, and we've got one basketball team in the area left, but some big games to break down this week. It was an exciting week of high school basketball in our area. Unfortunately, probably not as successful as it could have been. We had most of our remaining teams wash out, but T-Town is still alive, going for a super sectional tomorrow night. But we got a lot to talk about. We had the Neoga girls in their super sectional. We've got that excellent boys basketball sectional that involved Altamont and St. Anthony over at Altamont, which neither of those teams advanced, but there were some memorable games, to say the least. And then
Phil played at the same team, and both had opportunities to win.
They did. They really did. Opportunities and especially I think in Altamont's case, I mean, they had that game in control at one point. We'll get to it. And then, of course, the Totopolis boys, as I already mentioned, they got a sectional championship at Newton. Honestly, a little more hard fought probably in that title game than I might have expected against.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that title game. That was we're going to talk about both games.
Yeah, we are. So here's the deal. We at least plan this out enough to say that we will talk about Neoga first, and then kind of wrap up the girls' season to get our show started. There were Associated Press and IBCA all-state teams, in addition to the National Trail Conference all-conference team that came out. So we can run through those real quick too, sort of put a bow on the girls' season for the most part, and then we'll switch gears to the boys. We might. I don't know how we'll decide. I think since T-Town is going to the Super, I think we'll save them for last. I think we'll talk about, does that sound like a plan to you?
That's fine.
But anyway, we'll start with Neoga. The girls came within, I mean, they were in striking distance. They had leads against Christopher in that super sectional at St. Anthony. Could not get it done. They ended up losing by 5 points. 50-45 was the final. Christopher, we talked about Amaya Hargrove, their star player, their 6'3". I don't know if you want to call her a guard or a forward because she fills both roles for them depending on what they need. But
point forward is the lady.
She was as advertised. She scored 36 points against Neoga. Neoga had a chance to go to state back-to-back years, which obviously would have been historical, since going to state last year was historically, winning a sectional last year was historical. So the Neoga girls, they put forward a good effort. They played hard. They had leads. They led in the second quarter. At certain points, tied it back up after kind of a rough start to the third quarter. But it was just too much Hargrove. They just, at the end of the day, they just didn't really have an answer for her. They tried some things. They did some interesting things defensively with her, but she was just good. You know, she got too many back cuts for layups, but then also there were a lot of times where she'd just pull up and rise up on a 15, 18-foot jumper, and she was just money. She was
I saw some of her highlights, and that's what I saw, where she can just, you know, when you can do that on the girls' side of the circuit, even on the boys' side, honest, but when you can pull up from 10, 12, 18 feet, you've got a chance to really do damage.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to defend. She's a hard guard anyway, because she's taller than anybody. You know, as much length as Neoga had this season, 3 6-footers and a 5'11" in their, in their starting lineup sometimes, depending on who they went with at certain points in the season, but definitely in their rotation. They didn't have anybody who could match that. And they, like I said, they did some interesting things. They did some stuff where they played a box and one, but they'd switch on her depending on where she was on the floor. You know, they'd have Hackman, their point guard, and one of probably their best on-ball defender, stay with her out on the perimeter. And then if she got into the paint, somebody would switch off on her. And that assignment varied depending on how the game was going and who was in. But it didn't matter that much. You know, they never went to, as far as I could tell, they never went straight just double teaming her all the time and leaving somebody else. And I mean, that's you talked about having some success with that in different points in your coaching career, but
various junk things. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do. I mean,
it doesn't
to
necessarily
be honest, when
work.
the monster was effective for us because we used it to be a pain in the butt for a big. We used it to I used it to keep guards from, a guard who got to the basket at will to keep them from penetrating. So there's different things you can do. You just got to have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I think the concern, I'm without speaking for the Neoga coaching staff and certainly not second guessing them either, because listen, they've done a hell of a job. So like there's absolutely no reason at all for me to do that. I just don't, maybe the concern was that I know Christopher had some kids that shot the ball well at certain points in the season. And so it might have been difficult to identify who you would want to, leave, or if you did a triangle and two, and put the two on her, that leaves a lot of shooting openings, for a team that moves the ball well. And that's the thing. Christopher scored 50 points, 36 of them came from the Hargrove girl, but their other players, it's not like their other players it's not like she was carrying them. It's not like she's just bringing the ball up the floor and doing it all herself. They were a good team, a solid team. Well, I mean, they're all seniors around her. She's the only one coming back, and they ended up losing in the championship game to Oakville in the Oakville girl. Her name is Elena Krause, right? She is.
I'm pretty sure her dad just retired as head coach here within a year.
Yeah, and she's the real
I think
deal.
her dad's John.
She's the real deal. Both those kids are going to be back on their teams. I guess without really the game itself, like I said, Neoga had they fell behind 7-0 early, but got right back in it and had leads of, I think they got up by 5 points in the second quarter. And then Christopher put on a press, put the Hargrove girl out in the front of it, and they created a bunch of turnovers, all bang, bang, bang right there in the second quarter. Next thing you know, they've got a 3-point lead, maybe even a 5-point lead. Bryn Richards she heaved one from just inside half court right before halftime and hit it to tie things up. And you kind of felt like, well, there's some momentum, even though you are going to have to go sit for 10 minutes. Like there's, something went your way. You got to get some breaks to win a tight game like this. But then beginning of the third quarter just wasn't very good for Neoga either. And, they managed to tie it back up, but never played out in front again and weren't able to get Christopher chasing. And despite pulling off the miracle last year against Goreville, where they just completely shut down that team in the fourth quarter and made a huge comeback, this Christopher team was just too good to do that against. And from the sound of it, if Christopher had all their players available last year, might have very well been them instead of Goreville that got to that super sectional.
Well, and I listened to your broadcast, and it sounded like every time Neoga had an opportunity, either one of the girls from Christopher go to the line, hit 2 free throws.
Yeah.
Hargrove would hit a tough shot, or Neoga would have a chance and turn it over.
That's why when you're chasing Christopher in the fourth quarter and you're down 4, it feels like 6 or 8 because she's going to score again in the next trip or two because she's just that good. So you never really felt like you were within a couple buckets,
and when you come from behind, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about Altamont semifinal game, a lot of times teams will come from way behind and then can't get tied and then can't finish because you expend so much energy to get there. Not just physical energy, but emotional energy.
Yeah.
And it's just sounded like Neoga every time they had, we got the ball, they got a chance to cut it to 2 or 1 with the 3. And it was a quick shot or it was a turn, and it was just, they just could, they could see, they just couldn't get it there.
And Sydney Richards, an unbelievable player, scored more than 1,600 points in her career, leading scorer all year long. She only got 6. And I'll tell you what, it's disappointing because in that game, you got to get the star effort from your star player, but effort's the wrong word to use. The star performance from your star player,
Right.
and it was hard for her because again, she's having to against a team like that pressures you, makes it tough to get up the floor. It becomes incumbent on her to also help with bringing the ball up the court. She's drawing difficult defensive assignments, and I think at the end of the game, I just don't know how much gas is left in the tank.
Well, and that the pressure mentally weighs on you.
Yes, absolutely.
It really does.
That's you do it. I mean, that's as much a reason for doing it as the actual creation of turnovers. Even if you're not turning a team over a lot, it seems to me like it's still useful because it's just you're grading them down. You're working your way to the end of the game where hopefully
you just frazzle a team mentally to a point where it's tough, and you're hit the nail on the head there, buddy.
Yeah. So the Campbell girl, Haley Campbell, came back and she scored 16 points in that game. And I thought that for a while there, I thought they did some things where they were getting the ball to her in the post and she was scoring. And then Christopher switched her defense around a little bit, put Hargrove on her. And I thought, well, this is where Sydney Richards is going to take off. But I just don't know that it was fair to think that given the amount of energy expended.
Right.
And listen, like Matt said during the broadcast, there's not a team in the area over the last 2 years that wouldn't switch places with a team that makes to 2 super sectionals and goes to state one of those years. It's disappointing, but
tremendous accomplishment. Again, we've talked about this last game. Very disappointing, very hard on the kids, but you know what? They got up Tuesday and the sun was up.
And I want to hit on a couple things before we move on from this, and these are non-basketball things as far as Neoga goes. The Enloe Center on Monday.
I know, I saw pictures. Great crowd.
It was. I mean, there were people standing in the balcony. They didn't have the bleachers there because I just think there's too much stuff in the way, like other equipment now. But I don't remember seeing the Enloe Center that full since maybe. And I was trying to put my finger on exactly when this was, but the Idol twins were playing for Marshall, and there was a sectional there. And I can't.
Myers Leonard and Robinson T-Town sectional final there. They had the balcony bleachers out were full. They had people sitting 4 deep in chairs on the baseline.
Okay. Was Marshall involved in that sectional? I feel like I remember seeing Tom Brandon there for some reason. He's the
Idol twins played T-Town the year before and they had a big crowd, but that next year when they played T-Town,
I knew I was there for a game.
Myers Leonard senior year when Robinson won state.
I knew I was there for a game when they were they were full up. Like they got to a point where they had to turn people away.
I mean, they had chairs 3 or 4 deep on that deep baseline there on the west end.
And this crowd wasn't quite there, but Neoga did very well for itself. And of course did well for IHSA since it cost $9 or $10 to get into that game. But there were a ton of people there. Great energy in the building. Christopher brought a good crowd too. They had to come a long way, but they brought a very good and enthusiastic crowd. As far as I could tell, everybody behaved themselves on both sides of the floor. So, kudos to the Neogas fans. They really supported the team in Casey at that sectional. Of course, they hosted their own regional. The crowds got better and better as they went on. And, Mike Taylor, I mentioned him, the Neoga athletic director. I mentioned him last week. Does a great job, and all the other administration of making sure that the kids have a way to get there, to get the buses together, to because that's a huge thing for the girls to have a good supportive crowd behind them. And despite the fact that they didn't get the win, they're going to remember playing in front of that many people for the rest of their lives, because that's not the way it normally goes. You physically couldn't put more than maybe half that many people in the Neoga gym if you really, really wanted to. So they don't get that chance very often. And that was cool. They didn't win, but still going to be just caps a really, really great 2-year run for Kim and Seth and all the girls. And it was a pleasure for me to be a part of it. And plus, I got to tell you, when Richards hit that desperation 3 at the end of the half, I went back and listened to it, and it's probably about as good a job as I've ever done on a call for
Did you
any.
have another Peter Brady moment?
Listen, I did. My voice did not crack this time. There was no.
Oh, attaboy.
Yeah,
You're maturing.
It's pretty good. I was pretty proud of myself. So congratulations to Neoga on another fine season, and all the girls basketball teams in the area that had a great year. It's been a lot of fun following it. And with that, there are the honors that get handed out. We mentioned Sydney Richards, and she was a first team All-Stater for the Associated Press. That's a 5-person team. Hargrove was on there. Kraus was on there. The Furlong girl from Galena, who's not a senior either. I mentioned Hargrove and Kraus coming back, so is Furlong. And then Shelby Bowman from West Central Biggsville is the other one. But then Neoga, or the local area, had a couple other kids on the second team. Lucy Fearday from St. Anthony got on there, and Grace Nelson from Altamont. And then on the honorable mention for Associated Press 1A, Gracie Heckert from CHBC got on there. So that's all, good picks. For 2A, Kaylee Nieberge was the second teamer for Associated Press from Teutopolis. Again, she one of the finer 2-year runs that a girl is going to have at T-Town, I think, for Kaylee Nieberge. And the Anna Byers from Pana also on that second team, just another name that you may recognize. And then IBCA, a little different look to this one. Now remember, they put 10.
They lump 1 and 2A together, don't they?
No, they separate them now.
Okay.
But they do a 10-person first team, and Grace Nelson from Altamont was the only person from the area on that first team. She missed I don't know, about roughly half the season, I guess it was, with that knee injury. Maybe a little less than half. But she still managed to get on the first team there, second team for Associated Press. Second team, Sydney Richards and Lucy Fearday got on there. They do a third team, which Gracie Heckert was on. And then they do a special mention after that.
If you get for the most part, if you get nominated, you're a special mention.
Yeah. The Shasivsky girl from North Clay got on there, Allison Shasivsky. But
she got nominated.
It was just interesting to me because, I mean, not to take anything away from her, but North Clay had a couple other girls that had pretty good seasons too, scored more points at least. And I just didn't completely understand the mechanics of that. I don't want to take anything away from her, but I saw that and I was like, well, where's Maya Ballard? Because man, she's a heck of a ball player. But you understand how the
is the Shasky girl a senior?
That could play a part.
Ballard a junior, or is Ballard a senior also?
I believe Ballard will be back.
Okay, and it's. I know how the mechanics of the boys. You've got 25 coaches in a room from every. Usually have 2 coaches from a region. You nominate first team, and really you don't say, "Oh, I'm going to nominate Zach Wilson," because he's my son and I want to see him get an attaboy. I mean, if you really think they're first team, you nominate them first team, and then there'll be 22 nominations, and you'll whittle it down to 10. You'll pick 10, tally the votes. Then the leftovers get thrown into the second round, and then you nominate others for second round. And it becomes political. It becomes geographical at some point. Some areas kind of pool together to give maybe Southern Illinois more of a voice. It's just if you're 1,000-point scorer, everybody thinks you're a first teamer. I mean, when I was on the committee, I would get emails from schools in the farthest northwest corner of the state, and little Jimmy ended his career with 1,002 points by hitting a 3 to end his regional lose by 10 instead of 13. And he's a definite first teamer, and that's the thing. I mean, and some coaches don't. I would reach out to every coach in our region. I think Gary Shirley was on there with me. Maybe Scott Bales when he was at Sullivan, and we would reach out to every coach. Do you have someone to nominate? And there were sometimes kids you thought should be nominated.
They just didn't.
Coach doesn't read his email. doesn't want to deal with it. Who knows? We have nominated. I'm pretty sure we may have nominated a kid one time without a coach even suggesting it. We just said, "Hey, this kid deserves a nomination."
Yeah. Well,
So
that's interesting.
it's amazing. It like I said, you've got some guys that just season's over. I'm not going to look at my email. I'm done.
Well, that I'm glad to get some inside information really on how it works. And to be fair, like the AP team, I mean, you could have overrepresentation from a certain region for people who participate in that
Thing
too.
with the AP, you've got to be at the Final Four. Really, it's hard, I think, to get a top. If you're not recognized, if you're not there in the Final Four, it's hard for the AP. It's just hard to get that recognition. It
Yeah.
really is. And you could be at somewhere scoring just boatload of points, and I don't know who represents. I mean, I'm assuming the girls and boys have done similar, but I'm not 100% sure. But it's genuinely a pretty good thing. But I've seen guys nominated first team, and I'm like, no, I had kids on my team that I've seen this kid play that were better than. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's I don't know.
It's a hard thing to do because the access to information and eyewitness accounts for people participating, it's impossible. It's not like college and
Right.
professional.
But it's better now than it was 15 years ago.
Sure. Real quick, IBCA 2A. Kaylee Nieberge got on the first team there, and Emily Conkle from T-Town made the third team for 2A. If 3A and 4A information is out there for IBCA,
you got to hunt that up really on their website.
And they didn't have it on their website yet. The only reason,
sometimes they haven't gone back in yet. State tournament, they're just now.
Yep. Only reason I have these is because I found a story on them, and somebody had already called my attention to it. So there you go.
All right, and I want to add something to our girls' season.
Yes.
Are you ready for my tidbit I got?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Well, I was in Mecca today. Took my daughter out for her birthday. Her 21st birthday was yesterday, so I didn't go to the game.
Can you explain to people what you're talking about? Because some people may have a
Bloomington,
different idea.
Indiana. Basketball people, when you say Mecca, they know where it is.
Well, some basketball people. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so I got a text, friend of the show, Cindy Conkle, Emily's mom.
Mm-hmm.
She's known as Emily's mom. She's not known as Alan's wife. She's known as Emily's mom.
Fair enough.
Okay. Sent me a text. Fun fact. I'm just going to read it verbatim. I was like, I knew, but I hadn't really put it together in this context. Okay. 1A state champ was Okawville, correct?
Yes.
Second place in the Highland Girls Tournament.
Mm-hmm.
2A champ, Breeze Mater Day. Fourth, the Highland Tournament. 4A champ, O'Fallon. Third at the Highland Tournament. Now, Alton won the tournament, and at the time was ranked number 1 in 4A, and I'm pretty sure O'Fallon beat them, maybe in a sectional. Don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I saw that. But we talk about, man, that Highland Girls Tournament, that's the real tournament. Well, folks, you can't argue with what we just threw out there.
Yeah, we weren't full of it.
No, at least not that time. Now, your 3A runner-up is Lincoln, who's an Apollo Conference school. So really, 3 of the 4 champions and a team that happens to play here every, or used to, they won't anymore beyond now, but Lincoln's not in the conference anymore. Kind of ties have all, some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
In some manner been mentioned in our coverage of girls basketball. I mean, that Highland tournament to have 3 of the 4 state champs come from there.
Unbelievable.
That's awesome. And who was the 3A champ that beat?
Nazareth Academy.
Okay, so 2 of your 4 were private, so you'll still have the public-private argument. Modern Day's got a 6'5" sophomore.
Gross.
I bet she'd block a lot of my shots for you. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
So we gotta give Cindy a shout out there. She she was trying to be humble and say, oh, but that's her 15 minutes of fame, So
she's gonna be there's gonna be people coming out of the woodwork to ask her about that, getting a mention on this show. Let me
yeah,
tell
I
you.
think I was doing PA at a baseball regional maybe a year ago, and her son was pitching, or 2 years ago, and they told me it was her birthday, and I don't know, it was like birthday number 40, maybe. And I said, hey, I want to wish Cindy Conkle a happy 50th birthday. I got a dirty look from the stands, but that's okay. But no, and she watches the show, so that
And
was good. I wanted to pass that along. All right, Whitey. So let's move on to boys.
let's do it.
The Altamont sectional. I was not there. I listened to all three parts of all three of the games,
Yeah.
but you were at two of the three.
I
Or
was
did
at
you
two
go
of
to
the
all
three.
three?
I did not. I only listened to Altamont's game.
Okay, I
against
didn't know if
Casey.
you went as a fan to the Altamont.
No,
Casey.
I just figured that it was going to be kind of a tough ticket to get a hold of. I didn't want to. I didn't. I wish I had in some ways because of what it was apparently like in there. And the championship game couldn't have been much different, just in terms of the atmosphere. But
So you had Altamont Casey playing
yeah.
Tuesday night.
Uh-huh.
And I'm listening to it on the radio, and just the same as you were.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm texting back and forth with Aaron Britton. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Casey's hot, and just I'd text him, Casey plus 10, Casey plus 12, Casey plus 20. And I thought, holy crap. That was the 20 in the second quarter or early third?
No, it was
third, wasn't it? Wasn't there 5 minutes to go?
About 5:13 to go.
5 minutes, 5+ to go. They're down 20. And I'm like, man.
Now,
and I think was Mayhouse hit back-to-back threes to get it to 14. I don't remember exactly. I know he hit a couple threes in the early, but it got crazy. And to come back from 20 down, and I'm just trying to think. I don't know that I ever came back as a coach from down 20 to win. I gave up big leads sometimes, but I never. But we talked about the energy to get there, and then when you get there, it's like, and then all of a sudden you're down 4 again.
Well,
but they tremendous comeback.
Well, and we talk about we spent a lot of time over the course of the year talking about the depth that Altamont has. They can play 10 kids and not give anything up, and that helps a little.
He played 6.
Yeah, that helps.
And I think that was the reason they kind of quit making shots late.
Yeah, it was Yarhouse that hit the tying 3 anyway. They got it. I mean, so they're down. It was 43-23. Okay. Then Altamont scored 12 in a row.
Yeah. Didn't they score 12 in a row to end the quarter, and they were only down 8?
Yeah. And the tie was at 46. Okay. No, 49. Yeah. 49. So they outscored Casey
26-6.
26-6 over that stretch. And I want to tell you something. And I had a friend of mine and a coach in the area. She texted me at one point and said, this isn't going the way I expected it to go at all. And I said, I don't think it was quite when they were down 20 yet, but it was just shortly after halftime. I said, Altamont's still going to win this game because Casey's relying. I mean, they're having to hit every jump shot, and sooner or later, the bill's going to come due on that. You're not going to continue to shoot that higher percentage forever. But then I'll tell you, it got to 20, and I kind of wondered if maybe I had, if I wasn't so smart after all. But, Altamont is they have relentless energy. They've got the length and athleticism, to just keep coming at you. Johnny he'll sub in and out. He's not afraid to put that 9th and 10th guy in the game. And in fact, some of those last guys off the bench in that game were the ones who made key buckets. To
Yeah, it
get
sounded like defensively, the Miller kid really kind of sparked them defensively. And I will tell you something. Mason Robinson scored, I believe, 19 points and grabbed 10 rebounds in the second half.
Yeah,
That's hey, fellas, we ain't losing.
right. And I'll tell you, his old man tells it like this: he wasn't aggressive enough in the first half. Why wouldn't he shoot? You know what's
But I will tell you this, and I had people reach out to me that next day, and I text Matt. Probably the best announcing job he's ever done. And it wasn't just the case that his son was kind of spearheading offensively what was happening. Okay. And again, if you didn't know Matt was his dad,
right.
you had no clue.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing as a parent, Matt's living and dying on every possession.
Sure.
You know it. You know inside he's dying.
Well, and that's
or wanting to jump up and down. You know, as a parent, he's laughing, he's crying, you know, he's doing everything. And you can't tell in the broadcast.
And that's why the only reason I'd push back on you a little bit on that being the best job he did is because, quite honestly, maybe the way at the end of the championship game, him being able to hold it together and
I don't disagree with that at all.
Stay even keel might be even more impressive because that's the point where
I didn't get to hear that because, you know, by the time we got done, because my app would only work part-time and Chet was talking to Greg and I was listening to the app and we listened to, I guess, the fourth overtime a little bit while we're leaving. And then we listened, I think we went through lists when the horn sounded. So we had done our wrap-up, our post-game, waited a long time for Chet because you know how when T-Town wins a postseason, you know, it's family reunion time. And we finally got him up after talking to other media and doing what he's supposed to do. Okay.
Sure.
That's getting pictures with your team, talking to people, hugging and kissing your daughters and your wife. I mean, there's a laundry list of things you got to do.
Of course.
Before you come talk to us. And we were still done and able to listen to your game a third of the way
home. So yeah, we'll get to that game in a second. But then so Altamont comes back. They come back from 20 down. They win that by 2 points. I don't know that I ever said the final score, 61-59. And that's the first sectional game that Altamont had ever won in boys basketball. Yeah. So
Altamont boys.
Right. Yes. So that's a big one to get, and what a way to do it.
Now, I did see the video. The kid from Casey got a rebound, and his heave went through the rafters and didn't touch anything and came out of the rafters and hit the rim.
Almost went in.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that would have, boy.
Ooh, you talk about a wet towel.
I don't know if I could ever. Yeah, if I was emotionally invested in that game and it ended like that.
Missed the flag apparatus is what I wanted.
Well, just a 1 in a million shot for it to even get to the rim.
That's impressive to go through those rafters.
So then, so that gets Altamont to the championship game.
And then St. Anthony and Tuscola.
St. Anthony plays Tuscola, and St. Anthony had its chances. You know, they
led. I know they led through the halftime.
Yeah, they were ahead. They were ahead by 2 points at halftime. It was a low-scoring game and kind of a grind, which that seems to be sort of what they want. You know, as far as I can tell. Tuscola just and we'll get to, it's kind of a deja vu thing. In the third quarter, they started hitting some threes. They hit a couple of 3-pointers, and the Quinn kid, who had been pretty quiet, sophomore Quinn kid, Jordan, his brother Jalen was on that team last year, up at Loyola Chicago now. They'd kept him pretty quiet, and he made a couple of shots, and that just, it was never a very wide margin, but St. Anthony just, I don't know. It just felt like Tuscola had, I don't want to say this wrong. I just was a little concerned that St. Anthony was ever going to be able to get back out in front again once they fell behind.
Once the lead was taken away, they kind of got their spirit damaged.
Well, I don't know if it was a spirit thing as much as I just wasn't sure Tuscola was going to let that happen.
Well, yeah, and it sounded like Tuscola started shooting pretty well.
And I felt a little vindicated in feeling that way by the fact that Cody got on the air, interview with us afterwards and said, I just felt like whoever was going to have to be playing from behind in the fourth quarter was going to be in a lot of trouble. And so, that's just sort of how I felt too, that, Colin Westendorf scored 22 points in that game. So that's the second straight game for them that he scored either half or almost half of their points. And they needed it, because down the stretch, teams understandably knew that they needed to take Brock Fearday away and just sort of limit him as much as they could. And Westendorf was up to the challenge, but they just didn't get, I think, weren't able to get enough from anybody else. Like, you had to have one other person step up and hit a couple of shots, maybe a 3-pointer here or there, to try and, to just give them something else to think about. And it wasn't there. It just wasn't there that night. St. Anthony, that's the second straight year they've run into Tuscola in a sectional semifinal, and the second straight year that they've lost by 3 points, I believe. So,
and they had a 3 at the buzzer, but it sounded like it was heavily contested.
Yeah, it was.
And I heard the play-by-play, and I heard Westendorf got it off. And to be honest, in that situation, the kid who could get the best look is option 4 or 5.
Yep.
You know what I mean? They're not going to let him get a clean look.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't a clean look. I mean, he got it off, and it took a little bit of athleticism to get it off from the wing, but they got it up the floor. They needed as quickly as they needed to. But I never felt, looking at him at the position he was in when he got it away, you never felt like it didn't look like it was going to go in.
Well, hey, find the video of the Mounds Meridian kid hitting the 3 to beat Wayne City. It's a fadeaway from here, almost out of bounds in front of the bench. Bang, to win the semifinal.
But speaking of Macon Meridian, that was the team that eliminated Tuscola in the sectional championship last year on a heave from, it was about 3/4 court, wasn't it? That was at St. Anthony.
Casey took care of them this year.
Yeah, so but my point, I guess, is that Tuscola had kind of a heartbreaking finish to their sectional last year.
Yeah.
And boy, if a couple of different shots in the overtimes against Altamont go down, then that's the second straight time that Tuscola loses a sectional championship in just excruciating fashion. But that's
sound like Altamont had some trips to the line late too. That just
Altamont shot its free throws pretty good in the fourth quarter, but like overall in the game, the percentage wasn't there, and there were some 0 for 2 and 1 for 2 trips in the in the overtimes that they'd like to. Obviously, you'd like any point you can get in those situations.
Hey, and here's the thing, Whitey. I was sitting at a bar eating lunch today and watched Illinois miss 3 out of 4 late from the line, and driving home, listening to it. Indiana had a kid miss 4 in a row in the last 20 seconds of overtime.
Well, and that's the thing that like not to jump backwards, but for Christopher against Neoga, they made their free throws. You know, the
Yes.
Hargrove girl got to the line and she made them, and they had some other kids make them. In fact, they had a girl get to the line who was as far as the season stats go, was a poor free throw shooter, and she was just bang, 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 knocking them
Yep.
down. So, you know, it's always the little things at the end of a game that you notice the most. And free throws a lot of times are that, but that's why you practice them so much and you shoot them at the end of practice, probably when you're tired, you know, because that's what the game situation is going to be, right? Like
You can prep and do all that, and it still doesn't matter. You know, it's just, Chase Thompson goes to the line, 50-year senior, misses 4 in a row today. And he's like a 69% shooter. So who knows?
but
When we were
yeah,
listening to you in that fourth overtime, Mason Robinson went down a couple times.
yeah,
Was the floor slick? I've always thought Altamont's floor is slick.
On that end of the floor, on the stage end of the floor, yeah, it was. They were worried about it all night. The officials kept calling people over to wipe it up. There were a couple of drives to the basket where his feet just came out from under him. Like they were traveling calls, of course, but it wasn't like he took too many steps or did something
Yeah, he
careless.
just slid.
He just fell. But he was scoring on that same end in the third quarter or in the third overtime where he scored 6 in a row, 6 points in a row. And I don't know if it just, I mean, it was, listen, it's a unseasonably warm night. There's
a lot of people, a lot of hot air in the building.
A ton of people in the gym, and the kids are just, the game is just going on, and I'm sure they're just dripping wet. Like there's a lot of, like, it was just unfortunate. But I've been thinking about how do I want to talk about that game, because again, I was just saying there's so many little things here and there that you could talk about in a close, tight ball game that might have been the difference. And it's hard to single anything out. It's hard to know, like, this is the thing that mattered the most. And quite honestly, like when you're covering a game like that, and there's a certain level of excitement inside you, like you're not thinking straight either. Like you're just doing your best to just like get everything written down and try to come up with something intelligent to say, which I'll be the first to admit I was not sure what to say.
How were you able to do it in the book? Did you have to start a whole new page?
That's interesting you should say that. My stats meandered over into the rows where you add everything up. And then after the game, I just had to erase it all and write it smaller to make it all fit in that space.
I assumed on one of your breaks, you turned the page and started a whole new game with these.
That's what I should have. That's a good idea. And I will do that the next time, because those little books that we use are not very good for overtime games. They don't.
Well, you can get by with one. When you got to do 4, you're in trouble.
And I couldn't differentiate between one overtime and the next as far as what I was writing down. So that's another thing that, like, afterwards I'm like, I can't quite remember what happened in this overtime and that overtime. But before I talk about the overtimes, the thing you got to keep in mind about that game, which Altamont lost by 4 points, 72-68, quadruple overtime. Tuscola moves on to the Super. Altamont was beating them at halftime
14, weren't they?
It was 27-13. Yeah, 27-13. They limited Tuscola to 13 points in the first half. And in the third quarter, Tuscola started making shots.
Well, I had a friend there who said all of a sudden he just sent me a text that Tuscola can't miss.
They can't miss. A 16-0 run. They went from 31-16 to 32-31. And there's a couple of things to think about here. The first time those two teams played, which was at that CIC-NTC shootout, Tuscola made 14 three-pointers. Now, I don't know that their MO is always to hit a ton of threes, but they had obviously proven that they could do it against Altamont in that building. Like they had done it before. there were two things going into it. The Quinn kid was hitting some big ones. They got some from some other guys too. But if I had to nitpick a little bit about Altamont's game that night, some of the shots in the third quarter they weren't great looks, I guess I would say. They were quick.
Kind of rushing.
Yeah, and I get, and you're a coach, and you can speak to this a little bit better than I can. But I don't know how you tell your kids to stop doing the thing that got them ahead by 14 points in the first half.
Well, when you have a spell where everything you throw up goes in, and then you think, oh, this is going to keep going. Well, it's not. At some point, the spigot's going to get turned off. And you're right. But, the problem becomes sometimes when you get a big lead and maybe a little Sparky hasn't taken a shot. His job's to do X or do Y. And then he starts taking shots, quick shots.
Mm-hmm.
That's when, it's like, hey, you get back to what you're doing. But the problem is, it happened so fast. Well, Whitey, I had a 16-point halftime lead in the NTC tournament, and I think we even scored the first bucket to go up 18. And all of a sudden, 3 threes in about 30 seconds, and it's 9. And it was just a case where our execution, switching the screen, stopped. Hey, I forgot. Well, now we forgot 9 gosh dang points, and it's under 10, and deep down crowds making more noise, making your ears bleed, and you're like, holy crap.
Yeah,
and that we're in the deep end of the pool without our floaties.
Well, and that really sounds very familiar because, there was a stretch there where Tuscola would get a defensive rebound, come down in 1 or 2 passes, and somebody would knock down a 3. And they did it 3 trips in a row, and all of a sudden it's a 6-point game. I remember thinking, man, I thought this game was over, and here we are. And then it was just a battle from then on. It was just a dogfight. And every one of the first 3 overtimes, and if I'm misremembering this, I'm sure someone will tell me.
Well, Altamont had last possession every overtime, didn't they?
They'd get the ball first and get ahead, and then they would generally be in a position, to play for the last shot. Sometimes killing an awful lot of clock to do it. But Mason, he had 2 looks at the end of overtimes. One was a lot better than the other. It was a reverse layup that I thought it was going down. The other one was a tougher shot, kind of as I recall, a fall away from maybe 8 feet, something like that. But neither one of them went down. And then they get out again. He got out to a great start in the third overtime, and Mason scores three straight buckets. And you thought this is the time that they're finally going to get it done.
Yeah.
But again, a couple of 3-pointers. Quinn makes one, and then
weren't they at the line shooting 2 free throws up 3, like 25 seconds to go?
Yeah, missed them
both. Tuscola tied it,
and Quinn hits another one to force that overtime. So that's
at that point you're almost wondering if the stars aren't just aligned against you.
And once Tuscola finally won a tip in that overtime, in the fourth overtime, they got out front, they scored, and that they didn't lead for good because it got tied back up at 66. But that was it. After that 66 tie, Quinn made another shot, and then they never trailed again.
Yeah.
And again, it's just so hard for me to, other than maybe the things I've discussed, to really say, well, this is what could have been better, what could have been, what went right, and I don't you don't want to, I don't think. There's just so many moments, so much basketball played. You don't even really want to talk about any individual thing because you don't want anybody to be at fault or anything like that. It's just,
like you said, it's a game where there's possessions in the first 4 minutes of the game where mistakes are made that are the
Yeah.
same 2-point opportunity that are in the fourth overtime. So,
Mhm.
no, you're exactly right. Hate to see it. I mean, Altamont had a lot of weapons, had a great season. I just felt like when they came back and won that game against Casey,
They were destined.
they kind of were, yeah, they kind of, okay, that was their lucky break. And then they had that halftime lead, and I thought, man, they're really
Yeah.
taking advantage of that break. And then, holy crap. And it was amazing. And then we're sitting there, and the T-Town fans are on the floor, and we'd be like, overtime, and then we'd be like second overtime. They're like, third over. They're holy cow! But, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe not even maybe a lucky break in a 20-point comeback as much as like a wake up call. Maybe I was thinking like, hey, we
well,
can't.
I mean, it could be, but it's just you got to get that break. And to be down 20 and come back and win is getting a break, in my
Yeah,
opinion. No
it's
matter
still a
how
break.
good you play, it's still a
Yeah.
break.
Because the other team has some agency, right? Like it's not like you just say, "Hey,
They
we're
did
going
some
to do
things to
this,"
help.
and the other team's just going to let us do it. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
I think maybe there's some of both in there, right? But
yeah, there is. So
as it turns out, it wasn't meant to be. Altamont finishes. I mean, gosh, their season they finished with a. I want to make sure I get the record right here, but I think it was 29-6, right?
yeah,
29-5. They ran the table in the NTC. Is
2 of your 5 losses are to Tuscola.
yeah, and I mean one of the best, one of if not the best seasons that program has had. And they've had they've had teams I think maybe win as many or more games, but I guarantee they didn't push themselves schedule wise as much as they have.
Oh, I agree, and you got to give a shout out to Johnny, and well, Peggy would have been the AD when the schedule would have been made. So hey, we got some kids coming. Let's beef up our schedule to test us and prepare us, and almost.
Talented group of seniors. We mentioned Mason and some of those other kids. And here's the thing: be looking out for Altamont on the baseball diamond this year because they're gonna win a few games there too.
Yeah,
They've got
got
a chance to make a run in that regard as well. And again, just one more time, and I'm guessing Matt probably would have rather I didn't, but I wanted to say something about it on the air during our post game show. Just that I don't know if anybody else could have handled it the way he did with his kid playing.
Because big thing is you didn't know it.
Yep, just can't say enough about it. What I mean, trials and tribulations, the highs and lows of that week for him as a parent, and then to keep a lid on it and do a professional job. Can't say enough about it. Very impressed with that, and there's no way I could have handled it that way. I don't think so.
All right.
I think that'll put a bow on that sectional. Good luck to Tuscola. Going.
Yeah, I think they'll win just because everyone and their brother has told me the 1A Deep South isn't real strong. So who knows?
Mm-hmm.
They may not be able to hit it. They may not be able to hit the broadside of a barn. That
They may
happens
not,
sometimes in that arena.
But you know what? They've got a team that shouldn't necessarily have to hit a bunch of 3-pointers to win. They've got some pretty fun guards too.
Well,
and
I might get down there early enough to see some of that game tomorrow.
A lot of those guys will be back too. So good luck to them tomorrow night. And that leaves us with the T-Town boys, last team in the area standing. Not an unfamiliar position for the T-Town boys basketball program to be in. In fact,
yeah. Newton sectional kind of got off to a rocky start, buddy.
Yeah. Explain yourself.
We show up in our room we're broadcasting from. It's got a classroom number on it, and you're right there above the scoreboard, and there's a big sign says WXCF. We can see as we're walking up. We go, wow, that's impressive. And then underneath it says there's like an asterisk and says Greg Sapp, Hall of Famer. And then underneath it says Greg Sapp's lackey. Yes. And I was like, wow. And Coach Carr, the AD Craig Carr gigged me a little bit. And then he's like, he didn't come up in our booth, but he was kind of in the bleachers. asking Greg how everything was going, and he couldn't see me because I think I was hanging the sign, and he's like, "Hey, how's your lackey?" And then he's like, "Oh, hi." So he got me.
To be fair, and you mentioned that you mentioned to Matt and I that Craig must have thought that one of us was coming along.
Yes, that's what I thought the case was.
But I do.
But I know better.
I'll reiterate that. Yeah, if that had, it seems to me like he could have been a lot ruder. So maybe in my mind, Lackey calling you Saps Lackey is probably him being is coming up with the nicest thing he could think of to say to you.
Hey, I can stand in my driveway. If there were no trees, I could probably I might be able to hit a 3-wood to his house, rattling around off his garage. There's trees in it, so I can't. That's all right. And before we go on, I do want to say, Kevin Palmer, I heard good things about St. Anthony hosting the Super, that it was well run. Mm-hmm. Over at Altamont, Katie Lurkins, Altamont did a great job with theirs, and the Newton folks, Craig Carr, they did a good job. I mean, it's not easy. You have to deal with a lot of bandwagon fans. You really do. People who aren't used to being there and maybe get a little overzealous. And they did a great job running every facility.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously all the logistical stuff, but then there's, like you said, the fact that the crowds just get bigger and bigger, and you get people who think there's still people that I think the fans that go regularly, especially parents, like for the most part, they know how to behave. They're in the gym 30 nights a week. There's a few exceptions from every town, and we could all name those people from our town that need to grow up a little bit. But then you get people in the postseason. I think the combination of the games being of magnified importance, and then the fact that they're just not actually around that much, and they think that this is just what you're supposed to do at a ball game. Yeah, unruly is a pretty good word, right? Like,
and I really didn't see any of it.
No.
But I mean, I know they're dealing with stuff, and they did a great job. Now, T-Town's first game, Alton Marquette, they played them last year, and Marquette gave them fits for a half, really into the third quarter, before T-Town righted the ship and pulled away to win late. And I recognize, kids on the floor. Okay, I remember this kid. I remember probably 4 other kids are back who played a lot for Marquette. And man, start of that game, I guarantee you, Alton Marquette has never been guarded like they were guarded in the first half of that game. Ever.
What was the score?
Ever.
What was the score?
I don't care if you have 7 kids on the floor. It was 34-5, and I'm gonna tell you something. Could have been worse. It really could have been worse. And they really weren't big inside. They had one kid who had a little bit of size. He wasn't really physically, he wasn't built like Caleb Seamer. Caleb Seamer had a field day early, okay? And then all of a sudden, the second quarter, this Nieberge kid, Brendan Nieberge, scored 15 points in the second quarter. I'm pretty sure it was 15. He hit like 6 or 7 shots in a row, a couple wide open threes, made a great, went baseline, did a nice reversal, and it was just like, and then Marquette would come down, and when they got good looks, missed. And it got 34-5 at the half.
Yeah, Matt and I looked at each other when they gave us that score, and we just laughed. It's just like, how in the world? I mean, we know T-Town's good, but goodness gracious.
And I told Chad after the game, after the post game, I said, defensively, maybe the best half of basketball I've ever seen you play. Man, they were communicating. Again, when Marquette had looks they should have scored, they missed 4 free throws, okay? They missed some shots, but they didn't get many looks that were clean looks. I'll put it that way. And T-Town scored and scored and scored. And in the first half, it was kind of pretty heavy with Caleb and Brendan. It really was.
Mhm.
And Marquette went to a zone probably 4 or 5 minute mark, 4 minute mark, whatever. Once Brendan kind of went off on him and actually slowed T-Town down a little bit. And then they got out of it and went back to man. I'm like, so that game ended up 26. So really, I mean, and then, Marquette all of a sudden, I think, got it from 29 down to maybe 17, maybe 16. And you're thinking, no, this isn't Altamont Casey 2.0 because T-Town's defense just wasn't going to let that happen.
Yeah.
However, I think his first name was Parker Macias. He looked like Lionel Messi as a basketball. Kind of had that build, and he kind of had that video game way he ran around the floor. I mean, he was really, really quick, but he just started going down the side of the lane to the basket and going up and throwing stuff up, and it started going in. And then it kept going in. And then they hit a three, and they got it, I don't know, 17, 16, and then T-Town kind of regrouped, and it was fine.
Yeah, 54-28 was the final. So
Yeah,
obviously,
26 points. But, yeah, I was so impressed. So now Lawrenceville had beat Greenville in overtime on Tuesday.
and one thing I want to point out about that Marquette game, Garrett Gaddis scored 3 points in that game. Okay. Then we moved to the Lawrenceville game.
So now we're playing Lawrenceville. Good friend Randy Bishop, coaching Lawrenceville, had retired. We'd honored him in our Christmas tournament. He was retiring. Guy was there 1 year, then COVID, then left in May. Couldn't find anybody, convinced Randy to come back. So again, we honor you as a retiring coach. We know you're going to come back at the Christmas tournament because that's now happened twice. So I went down for the game, talked to Randy a little bit. He and I known each other a long time. Great guy, heck of a coach now. I mean, a good coach. So used to just thrive on 1-3-1 back in the day. So I'm like, well, they go 1-3-1. That's kind of an Achilles sometimes for T-Town. Just it slows them down.
Mhm.
Okay, it slows them down. Their approach isn't real. I don't think real quick against a 1-3-1, so that kind of slows them down a little bit. Well, Randy didn't play a 1-3-1. He and an incredible game plan on his part. He, in essence, kind of played a box and one. If you really wanted to break it down, it was probably a triangle and two. But he put a kid on Brendan Nieberge. Brendan had 2 points. Made 1 point, made 1 free throw, 1 out of 2 from the line. Took 2 shots other than his free throws. This kid he couldn't get the ball.
Yeah.
All right. They put their other guard on top of the key. And then they played their other 3 pretty much in a 3-man zone, like a 2-3 across the baseline. Now, it could have been a triangle and 2 with them having one guy always with Caleb Seymour, but they took Brendan Nieberge and Caleb Seymour completely out of the game. Every time Caleb Seymour touched the ball on the floor, he was usually then immediately double teamed. Two first shots I think he took. The Jenkins kid just swatted him. Said, no, you're not going to just stand here and shoot little turnaround jumpers in the lane. On offense, T-Town was very aware of where the Jenkins kid was at all times. Good player. Scored 30, 34 maybe in the semifinal. So a lot of touches, they would double on him. Lawrenceville kept finding the open man, and there was a lot of times they might kick it to a kid, and then in their scramble, T-Town sometimes would run two guys at him. And Lawrenceville would just, okay, boom, they'd kick it to the next guy, and they hit those open shots. I mean, they hit those open shots. First half, they had it to 6 at halftime. Now, early, as soon as the defense they're playing, and I tell Greg on the air, I said, Greg, they need to get Garrett Gaddis in the game here really, really soon because he can shoot all day because they've only got one guy guarding the perimeter. They can't guard people on the perimeter. And the other thing they could do was you can reverse it to a kid on the perimeter, and I could dribble to 8-10 feet and shoot like I'm playing horse. You were open until you got within probably 4 feet of the bucket, unless your name is Brendan Nieberge or Caleb Seamer. Randy just said someone else has to beat me.
And they did.
Okay. And they did. But the shoes just in that first half weren't settling for that 8 to 10 footer when they could. They kept getting deeper. Caleb was getting frustrated. He'd get touches in the block. There's one time they triple teamed him, and then he put it on the floor, was going to make a move, and they just said thank you and took the ball. Brendan wasn't even getting looks. I think he did get off 2 shots, maybe 1, maybe 2 in the first half. But just textbook, man, everything was working for Randy. They were hitting the shots. You come out the third quarter and you think, okay, Lawrenceville may have got the ball to start the second half. And you think, okay, this is going to, now's when the shoes are going to make a stand. And Lawrenceville scored the first 4 points, like within a minute. It's a 10-point game. And you're thinking, I know Chet called the timeout. And while we're doing commercials, I text somebody and I text 2 people, and both responses were, we're in trouble because everything Lawrenceville wanted to have happen in the game was happening. And everything T-Town didn't want to have happen in the game was happening. And then Garrett Gaddis got one of those wide open looks from the perimeter, and he hit it. And you could just sense in the whole building, they're fine. And he ended up with 23. And I mean, in that third and fourth quarter, dominant. He was hitting shots. He was hitting 2s. He was hitting 3s. Maybe hit 6 shots in a row at one point. Got a steal. Went down, got an and 1, and then somebody had missed a shot, and he ripped the rebound away from a kid and stuck it back up and in, maybe to give them their 2-point lead. Joey Nieberge in the first half, ball wouldn't cooperate for him. Shots weren't falling. He was getting some decent looks. All of a sudden in the third and fourth quarter, he starts making shots. All of a sudden, Jimmer Nieberge gets a couple shots in transition to go down. He got a really nice and 1 off the steal, and Lawrenceville quit making shots. At one point, I think it was middle of the third quarter, early third quarter, when they got T-Town down at 11. At that point, Lawrenceville was 8 of 16 on 3s. Okay?
Yeah.
They ended the game 9 of 23, hit 1 of their last 7.
It's just hard to keep that up for a full game,
Sure it is. And some of their other shots quit falling. And then T-Town got to the line, and T-Town made their free throws. They shot 78% probably for the game, somewhere along that line. Made free throws late.
17 of 22 on their free throws.
Yeah, and shot the ball well in the fourth quarter from the line. All of a sudden went from down 11. I think they got it up 9 at one point.
Mhm.
So just
Ended up winning by 7.
end up winning by 7. Just a great turnaround. And it's kind of funny. Every time I see Garrett, if I'm in a game and they're walking by to go get dressed, I'll just look at him and say, shoot, because he's a shooter.
Yeah.
And in Chet's post game, he talked about their practice Thursday. He was passing up shots, and they were joking about, hey, where's that number 52? Because as a sophomore, he wore number 52, because you're pretty far down the totem pole to get a shirt. And as a sophomore, he wasn't too shy about shooting. And at times this year, he's been a little hesitant, and they were joking about that because Chet mentioned it. And I think in an interview I read with Steve Raymond, Brendan Nieberg said the same thing about, well, I was glad to see number 52 back.
Gaddis, 23 points, obviously season high for him. The most he had scored in a game this year prior to that was 16, but he did it against East Peoria.
Yeah. Well, no, and the thing is, and I told Chet, earlier in the week, I said, if they're going to play you this 1-3-1, I mean, Garrett Gaddis is a shooter. He will thrive against what you can see there. Well, they didn't see exactly that, but I guarantee you, Randy Bishop did not have number 10 high on his scouting report as a kid. We cannot let him get going.
Yeah, the kid that's averaging 7 points a game is going to light us up for 23. But that's and we've had this conversation before, but that's the thing. You can take Brendan Nieberge away. You can keep Caleb Seamer in check. 11 points is keeping him in check.
And he probably got 6 or 8 of those in the fourth quarter.
And so you can do all that. You can do that hard work, and that's not easy to do.
Oh no!
And then you got Joey Nieberge scoring 13. Not the highest point total he's had all year, but pretty close. 16's the most he's scored, and another guy who's averaging about 7 a game. But that's just the thing is that
you got 13 from Jimmer.
Yeah, you've got 5 guys that any given night can go out there and put 15 or 20 points on the board. And that is,
you got 49 from what they had on their scouting report, options 3, 4, and maybe 5. Probably, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, we're not going to let these 2 kids beat us. And they did a hell of a job of not letting that happen. But, the other 3, and really, Joey and Jimmer first halves were not stellar, and their team was just needing something. And then Garrett Gaddis, and I love the kid. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He'll guard you hard. He ain't gonna back down. He gonna fight you. And he got that whole building so energized. Greg Sapp almost had a Peter Brady moment, after one of those threes he hit. Because it was just Gaddis, Gaddis, Gaddis. I mean, you listen to that from about the 6-minute mark of that third quarter till the end of that third quarter. Oh my.
Well, those are the kind of things that especially when you don't have a lot of actual skin in the game and you're wanting to see the good story. You're wanting to see something interesting happen. I mean, that's so much fun when a kid just shows up. A kid who had scored, I'm just looking at the last few games for Gaddis. 3, 3, 4, 3, 5, 2. That's the last 6 games he played. And
he had 23, and I think he only scored 3 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that's just an amazing thing. And no matter what happens for T-Town the rest of the way, that's the kind of thing that he'll remember forever,
But it was just he not only energized his teammates because defensively their defense got better. Yes, Lawrenceville missed some shots. They were doing a better job of not running 2 guys sometimes at people. But boy, I'll tell you, you talk about making the building electric.
Yep.
And he threw the switch. He really did. And it was funny. Strangest coincidence I've ever seen. We didn't have the greatest weather. on Friday night.
Right. Yes.
High winds, potential for storms. Before the game starts, Whitey, they make an announcement at noon. In case of a power outage, our emergency lights will come on. We ask you to all remain seated and we will give you instructions. Okay. It's almost like, is this another one of the IHSA things you got to read? 30 seconds into the halftime, a minute into the halftime, power goes off. For about 30 seconds or so, maybe it was sometime during halftime. I thought Greg was going to have a baby. Oh my gosh, he was in panic mode. We're on the cell phone, so we never lost anything, and we weren't doing anything because we were listening to the commercials. But yeah, we lost power, and the building went black.
So the mixer didn't have power, but the cell phone was still able to run off its battery.
So we could still hear. I don't know that we ever lost hearing. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, it was Friday was nasty. Power was out of my house here in Neoga for a couple hours that afternoon. So
now the shoes
Pinckneyville
go back to the super. They've had what? Oh, they've lost 7 supers in a row now. Not their last 7. They've had 7 trips to a super sectional, let's say, in the last 13 years without a win.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up just.
Well, it started in 2011. They lost at Springfield.
Yep. Obviously, you had
11 and 12. They lost in Springfield. 13-14. They lost in Carbondale. That's 4.
Yep.
Jason Hansen lost 1.
Yeah, that was in 15-16. That was his first
has
year.
Chet lost 2 in his first 4 years?
Yeah, his first year they went to super, and then
they've made 7 trips in the last 12 years.
You're right.
And
which is, first of all, I mean, any other program would kill for
I
that.
know. Lost to Harrisburg, who was a state champ. Lost to Nashville, who was a state champ. So twice you've lost to a state champ. Lost to Uni High that I can't believe wasn't a state champ. It's just Nashville's got them twice. Bree Central's got them once. The Pittsfield one's the one that just stings beyond sting. But it's just, it's almost like it's a monkey. And it shouldn't be.
Yeah, like I said, nobody else could even come close to that level of success as far as getting that deep so many times. But yeah, it's hard to differentiate because you don't care that everybody else would kill to have that. You want to get back.
No, you're exactly right. I have struggled shooting the ball at Carbondale. Really have.
Yeah, I mean,
we actually went
18 points in the super sectional game.
Well, and then Nashville pretty well shut everybody else down in the state tournament too.
Yeah.
We actually went and shot at Effingham on the side baskets with all the bleachers in, so you had like no background. Because it's different shooting in that facility. But just have never shot it well.
They're gonna get another chance, but they're
gonna get another chance. Pinckneyville beat him, I believe, 5 at the Pinckneyville shootout.
I've got that pulled up. I think it was 9 actually.
Oh, was it 9?
I'm going to double check. I had it pulled up and I went, 51-40 was the final there. That was on January 28th.
Oh, so beat him 11.
No, 51-40. 50-41. I'm sorry.
Oh, 50-41. So beat them 9. They and I guess Pinckneyville's kind of gone a lot of 1-3-1 now, which is kind of funny because Bobby Wagner was never that way. He was always kind of a man-to-man until you die.
I don't follow coaching trends, and I up until a few years ago probably didn't pay that much attention. But I feel like I don't is 1-3-1 kind of become more popular recently. I
I don't
mean,
know. I don't know. I don't
like
see
a
it a
lot more
lot.
good teams are playing it this year.
Yeah, well, Corn or Christ Our Rock did because they didn't have any depth and they were long. They didn't want kids getting in foul trouble. And I don't know, maybe Pinckneyville doesn't have a lot of depth. I'm not sure. I watched their video of them beating Columbia in the regional. They didn't play it the whole time, but they played it a lot. So I don't know. It's just I think the thing it generally does, it forces you into a lot of perimeter shots. Okay. And it tends to slow you down. And I think you have a lot of coaches that like to see scores 48-42. They like to keep the game under control. I was just the opposite. I wanted, I felt like if I got to 70, I could beat you. Um, so, some guys want to, they get a little puppeteerish in calling their games. So they like the slower pace. And the 1-3-1 will do that to you. It can slow you down.
Mhm.
So I don't know. One thing I think you're able to do is crash the boards against it,
Mhm.
which offensive rebound in T-Town is as synonymous as T-Town in defense. There was years Kenny Crawford, I think his offense was just throw that sucker up and we're going to get it. Because they would.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I do know that the shoes will be very well prepared. Um, they'll go down there, and I think you got to avoid the kids being tight. And I don't know if that played into it last year at all against Nashville. I felt like they made some uncharacteristic mistakes, not normal mistakes, early in that game, and then Nashville just defensively were really, really good and took a lot of things away. Um, I think you just go into this game with we got nothing to lose. We're playing with house money. I mean, I just think you've almost got to take that approach because you can't get and nervous and think about, oh my gosh, I can't take this shot. You got to play.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to say I sat on the bench with Andy Fehrenbacher at four supers and we couldn't get through one. And it's not like, I was whispering magic formulas in his ears because it's just, it just seems like it's a different animal. It really does. And I think you get too caught up in the whole fact that, man, if we win this game Wednesday night, we go to Champaign because get a practice on the assembly hall and we get a, do this and that. And then we get to play Thursday. And I just think that gets in your head
Sure.
and you
Especially if you're a
start
high school
worrying
kid.
about what's going to happen after we win. I just think you get distracted. I know that sounds like an excuse, but I know, man, when we went up there and played Pittsfield, I told my kids, hey, we're going to Peoria. Make sure you got your homework done.
Yeah. It's
And we
I think it's
did.
just I mean, a lot of times I think all bets are off a little bit, It's just
It is.
you could say all the right things, you could do all the right things beforehand, but the game is going to be the game. And I think I would guess that there's probably very little control the adults have over things.
No,
The kids
you're
are just going to
exactly right.
respond the
And
way
it's
they do.
just, it's, yeah. I mean, miss here, miss there. I remember we played Nashville and they had Royce Newman
Mhm.
and another big kid inside, and we shut them down. we limited their bigs to almost nothing. I mean, our game plan was keep those kids from beating us, and we did. And then they had these guards were getting to the hole and getting and ones all night against us, and we were like, where is that coming from?
Well,
so I don't know. I'm going down Monday. We're gonna
good.
Morgan's riding. You want to go, Whitey? You got room. It's just Morgan and I.
There is a committee that I sit on in my church that I have skipped the last 2 meetings for basketball games.
You're good on Zoom. You're good on Zoom.
I'm going to go to that, and then I'm going to catch the bulk of the basketball game.
Going to Quattros.
I've never been. I've heard good things. My sister went to school down there, so I've heard good things about all.
We will send a picture to my son in Nashville. He may tear up.
Hey, listen.
Zach was a Saluki. He may tear up when he sees we're eating Quattros.
I think we'll look forward to talking about the shoes in that super, and hopefully maybe next week we'll have some state tournament games to talk about too.
I hope so. I really do.
But in the meantime, I can tell you that it looks like Northwestern's going to beat Rutgers tonight. They're ahead 13 with like 3 minutes to go. So
Indiana will be the 3 seed.
Looks like Indiana's going to be the 3 seed, and Northwestern, just like we all picked at the beginning of the year, Northwestern's going to get the 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament.
Just like we all picked in the year, the preseason number 1 may not even make the tournament. I wonder when that's ever happened.
Yeah, North Carolina stinks.
They got most of their kids back, Whitey. I haven't figured that out yet.
So does Illinois, by the way. Like I'm just kind of, I'm not really having a good time watching the Illinois team play anymore. Like that's got nothing to do with losing today because Purdue's better, but still, Illinois gets the 7 seed if Northwestern wins this game. Illinois gets the 7 seed no matter what, actually, but it's just a matter of who's in that 2 seed, waiting for Illinois or Penn State.
That could be Illinois Northwestern.
It could be.
If Illinois wins,
they got to beat Penn State first, and they haven't been able to do that this year. So
Penn State shoots awfully well against Illinois.
So Indiana, if they get the 3 seed, then they're going to be waiting for, probably Maryland, but maybe Nebraska.
I think we split with Maryland, or we only played them once and got beat.
Yeah, Minnesota and Nebraska have to play for the right to play Maryland, for the right to play Indiana.
Hey, Nebraska beat Fran in the Fighting McCaffreys today.
The Big Ten is just like, again, it's hard for me to tell whether it's a good conference or a bad conference, honestly. We'll
know in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, I just feel like there's been years where I thought, this Big Ten is an excellent conference, and there's going to be 1 or 2 teams make a deep run, and then they don't really make any noise.
Hey, you know what we do next week also? We get started on our bracket competition.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Did you win last year? Or
no,
did I win?
I don't think
I won.
I don't remember. We need to go back and look.
Well, you still owe me lunch from our regionals championship.
That's the real reason I don't want to go with you to Carbondale, because
you can buy Quadros.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's if you buy good pizza, it's okay. It really doesn't hurt that bad.
Well, listen, if T-Town wins, I may have to head up to Champaign on Thursday. I kind of would like to see that, but I don't know what your plans are, but
we'll find some place to eat lunch in Champaign then.
Yeah. So anyway, the Big Ten, we'll see how that all shakes out. But
I'll tell you what, it really gets interesting starting Friday.
Yeah, that's going to be. There's going to be a lot of crud to wade through between now and then. A couple of really just Minnesota and Nebraska. Is anybody going to actually go watch Minnesota and Nebraska play on Wednesday, or will they have to give tickets away to get people in the building for that?
Hey, I do got another shout out.
Okay.
Lutheran North is in the Missouri 3A semifinals.
Good. That's a Christmas Classic team.
Christmas Classic. They lost the consolation championship to Highland, I believe.
Yeah.
So they're in the quarterfinals or semifinals in the Missouri 3As. We've had that Academy of Law was a state champ in 3 or 4A from the Christmas tournament. So
Well, that's good news. I don't know, anything else we need to
Nope,
touch on
nope.
before it's so one probably one more week about I mean, yeah, one more week of basketball games to talk about. And
One
then
more week, and then we just got to see if we get a big snowstorm before spring is officially here or not.
yeah, we may, I don't know, not to plan too far ahead, but with no basketball, with no games of anything really to talk about, depending on guest situation, we may or may not take a week, here or there. But
Well, we've had a lot, so I've been kind of not really trying real hard to get people.
that's the thing. We just sat here and talked for an hour and a half about basketball, and
I
I
know.
feel like there's things I probably could have talked about. I could have talked about how in that Altamont Tuscola game, there was a point where Tuscola hit a three to tie it late in the game. Can't remember if it was late in regulation or the first overtime. Must have been regulation, but I don't know if it was a question about the official not giving the signal or what, but only 2 points.
Yeah, only two went on the board.
And so Tuscola's coach is like, losing his mind trying to get that right. And
Did they
not
get
sure.
it fixed?
They did finally get it fixed, but it was after a play finally happened. But there were, I don't know, it felt like an eternity. I don't know how many seconds actually came off the clock, but probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 20.
Well, somebody said they didn't. Their kids thought they were down and fouled when they were really tied.
They definitely fouled, but yeah, I don't know if that was because they fouled on purpose because kid drove into the lane.
Okay.
I mean, I will say that foul happened. Uh, it didn't happen 30 feet away from the basket or anything.
Okay.
It was on an attack. So, but
Well, and that's again, there's enough going on at that scores table. Now we're gonna
yeah,
add a
I
shot.
mean, it was
I know.
insane.
Now we're gonna add a shot clock. Not next year though. I've been told by a pretty good source we got at least another year before the shot clock becomes official. You want to know why?
Why?
Ain't enough shot clocks.
I just think that's just going
Supply
to
chain, Whitey. It's a supply chain issue.
it's just the tip of the iceberg, for why it's in my
Oh, I
opinion
know. There's a lot of reasons
a
why I think it's a
logistical
bad idea.
nightmare.
Yeah.
Whether I
All
mean,
right,
no matter
brother.
what you think about it, it's
We'll put a let's
logistical
put a
nightmare.
bow on it.
Let's
Let's
do
put a
it.
bow on it.
It's late. I'm tired.
Yeah, I gotta figure out what's for supper.
Yeah, that's the thing. You've been on the road today. I've just been at home. I've just been waiting for this weekend to go by mostly because then get the cabinet people in to finish up tomorrow. It's hard to sit and look at your cabinets halfway put in. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So we'll
Hey,
be.
two-time defending champ at Catholic Charities trivia contest now.
Oh yeah, did you guys win last night?
Yeah. It
Sounds
was
like they should do a better
hard.
competition.
This was hard. Jim Hammer the rest of my team had to work. So
Well, I guess how many teams were in it?
not very many. Our turnout wasn't very good. Maybe 8.
It must be just a tough time. Like I don't. Maybe
I
there's
think so. We had it in
interest in
February.
trivia
We had it in
contests.
February before, and we had really good turnout. 18 teams. So I don't know. I don't know.
Booster Club in Neoga does one every year, and it's always really well attended. And then
I know, but was that a Neoga girls? Maybe you're going to be. We got to cancel type thing.
I get no. It was because of lack of. They specifically said lack of interest. So I'm not sure.
Well, but was that because people thought they were going to be?
I couldn't. Who knows?
They wouldn't commit because they thought they were going to be in Bloomington because they canceled it before Monday, didn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, maybe they
Trivia contest or the golf outings of the winter.
yeah, it's a good place to get together with people and have
they're fun
and have a good time. Yep. All right, we ready to call it?
Yep, we're good.
All right, we'll talk to you about those T-Town boys next week. Looking forward to
All
it.
right, see you, bud.
Later.